So is Obeah religion? Do you think it should be legal to practice Obeah in Jamaica? Well, one of Jamaica's top historians has gone to court. He wants a court to say the Obeah Act is unconstitutional. This is going to be an interesting one. I have a breakdown for you. I'm Dion Jackson Miller. Thanks for joining me courtside. Time for tea. So look, folks, this is not an academic discussion. The Jamaica Observer reported that a man in St. James was charged for practicing Obeah in March 2025. The reports are that the police said his house was shrouded in a mist of smoke. They said there was incense burning in each corner of his bedroom. They searched his house. They found a plain white t-shirt with various denominations of money on the floor, surrounded by burning candles in a ritualistic fashion. He had various boxes on his dresser labeled Money Rain, Money House, African Powers. He had been wearing 4 silver rings. The police told him to take them off. He said he was afraid of dying and that the rings were protection, and he said he was fully guzzo. And he told the court he had problems sleeping at night. Judge asked him what him do for sleep. Him say him just buy 2 little incense. So the judge said must try magnesium or prayer or read him Bible, and ordered him to pay a $5,000 fine or spend 5 days in jail. Now, you have to tell me, what you heard there sound like something that should be illegal. Look, historians have said for years that the Obeah Act is racist, that it was put in place because the white planters were afraid of the power and the strength that enslaved peoples pulled from the religion they brought from Africa. We should not be perpetrating that racism on ourselves. Man, I like said the white oppressor then left, and I can still look back and see all the ways in which them brainwashing still a work power. For people who are saying Obeah practitioners try to harm people, as attorney Bert Samuel says, he's representing Dr. Hutton in this, right? And he says, look, we already have laws for all the things we're not talking about. If somebody tries to hurt somebody physically or to defraud them, we have laws for that. Now, Dr. Clinton Hutton wants the court, as I said, to declare the Obeah Act unconstitutional. He cited a number of grounds. I'll go through some of them with you. But before that, bear in mind, the Obeah Act is an 1898 act. That means it's from the 19th century. We're in the 21st century now, right? It was passed over 120 years ago. You know what was happening 120 years ago? We didn't have universal adult suffrage, meaning all adults couldn't vote, and so that means poor black people couldn't vote. We were just about 50 years out of emancipation from slavery for the enslaved peoples. We're about 30 years past the Morant Bay Rebellion, and things did rough for black people of African descent. Context matters. That's why it's important that the person bringing this case before the court is Dr. Clinton Hutton, former lecturer at the University of the West Indies. He's now at MICO, and he's done research for years on Jamaican, Caribbean, and African history and culture. He's a big thought leader in the culture, hugely respected. He's saying the Obeah Act violates a bunch of constitutional rights. For instance, one of the sections makes it a criminal offense and punishes with imprisonment, not just a fine, a person's right to believe in and practice the supernatural powers and or knowledge as defined by the Obeah Act. He's saying it breaches the right to freedom of expression, for people to express their belief that they have supernatural powers, and it breaches the right to equality to freely practice religion like other faiths. So there's more. I'm going to stop here for a minute because I can hear people now saying, what we do? We promote supernatural behavior. Let me point this out. The word supernatural means of or relating to an order of existence beyond the visible, observable universe, especially of or relating to God with a capital G, or a God with a common G, demigod, spirit, or devil. So if you're Christian, it actually means you do believe in a supernatural being. And because you believe in a different supernatural being from the one I believe in, it doesn't mean that either of our beliefs should be unlawful. Hindus, for instance, beautiful religion, they believe in a number of different gods. Now, they believe that Hinduism should be unlawful in Jamaica, and I'm gonna bet that there are some people who would probably say yes to that. Again, just because you don't believe in something or you don't approve of something or it doesn't accord with your lifestyle or your cultural beliefs, that doesn't mean it should be unlawful. Also, try to resist the temptation of accusing me of practicing or believing in Obeah, because that's not what this is about. Look, what I'm saying though is that I do think we need to learn more about how our former white oppressors managed to make us believe that everything about us and everything we brought from Africa was bad. Our hair, our language, our skin color, and yes, our religion, and that instead we must try look like them, behave like them, and yes, practice religion like them. Look, man, the parliamentarian them know for a long time that the Obeah Act should be repealed, right? But every time they bring it up, then elements of the church start to object and they drop it again. So there actually was in 2019 when the Justice Minister was talking about it, a really big national conversation. Some people supported the Justice Minister, as I said, some were against it, including some members in the church. So now, for instance, we've had Archbishop Brian Cameron from the Spiritual Christian Revivalist Council of Churches saying the council is firmly opposed to this proposition. They say Obeah is often viewed as a practice rooted in superstition and sought for various mystical outcomes, and that it represents beliefs and practices contrary to the fundamental principles of the Christian faith, and that legalizing such practices should undermine the moral fabric of our society. Difference, though, is that this is a court case, not just an appeal to politicians afraid of losing the next election. Look, man, if you've ever heard Professor Hutton when him start talk, the man is a master storyteller. You'd just sit down there and just listen. Let me share some of the paragraphs from his affidavit with you, alright? So he says it's his opinion that the practice of Obeah is a religion because it's a faith-based belief system where one believes there's a supernatural controlling power. So he says the practice of Obeah, like other religions in Jamaica, should be afforded the same protection under the Constitution. He says research shows that the practice of Obeah was not unlawful in West Africa, that it was criminalized by the colonial powers who kidnapped and transported Africans to Jamaica to endure centuries of forced labor and forced them to practice the religion of their captors. He says it's a notorious fact that after Africans came to Jamaica, that Indians from India came. He said these Indians have actively engaged in fortune telling and promoting beliefs regarding their supernatural abilities, and they continue to advertise these practices through traditional media in Jamaica today without facing the legal restrictions or criminal penalties that are imposed on Obeah practitioners. He said several religious groups in Jamaica rely on instruments that they believe hold supernatural powers, healing abilities, or to bring about supernatural occurrences or events. For instance, some religious practices rely on oils for healing. He said the Catholics have their sacred vessels used during worship, particularly the Eucharist, which are known by several names, including the chalice, a cup used to hold the wine that becomes the blood of Christ. He said the practice of Obeah has been misunderstood and demonized as being evil in its entirety and is harmful in all tenets and practice. He said this demonization was promoted by the British enslavers, who themselves feared the powers of Obeah men, who were the vanguards of the resistance against chattel slavery and a threat to the continuation of our enslavement. He says based on his training and commitment and respect for the cultural practices of his ancestors, he is at risk for being charged for possession of instruments of Obeah, in that he conducts and continue to conduct research in the area of African retention. And he also said he's offended that other ethnic and religious groups can believe that their religious leaders have special supernatural powers or knowledge to read the palms of their believers and practice fortune telling, and they're not punished under the criminal law. But in breach of the fundamental rights of those who believe in the powers of the Obeah man, they're deprived of equal treatment before the law. And some of the other constitutional rights that Professor Hutton says the Obeah Act violates: the right to association, because the Act says you mustn't consult an Obeah practitioner; the right to provide religious instruction; the right to privacy and the right to protection from search of person or property; the presumption of innocence; the right to freedom of thought, conscience, and belief; the right to freedom of expression; the right to seek, distribute, or disseminate information; the right to freedom freedom of movement because the act requires police supervision after conviction. So it's an interesting case. I'm going to be following it closely. Tell me what you think. Is the Obeah Act racist? Should we continue to keep it on the books? Drop your comments below. Remember, just be civil, all right? Gonna leave it there. Remember, as always, please like the video now, share it with somebody you think might be interested, subscribe to the channel, and click the notification bell so you know anytime I drop a new video. All of that helps the channel grow. I'm Dion. Thanks for joining me courtside. Back to my tea.